Joining me now is Patrick Wood. He has a show on our network every Tuesday and Thursday, 6 p.m. Central, Technocracy.news with co-host Logan House. His website's Technocracy.news, and he joins us now. Patrick, welcome back. Let's talk about a brand new article on your website. Technocrats spark global war over crypto supremacy. I want to play a video clip, but tell me about this article.
Well, we see the president just signed an executive order basically banning anything other than electronic payments to citizens of America, for instance, like Social Security checks, other types of disbursements as well. And also they want to encourage now, and if not ban, all incoming receipts from people. And, basically this is going to turn America into an electronic cash register, the government. So this is huge.
So are you saying that they want to make it where if you get a Social Security check, you have to get it through a crypto? That's
right. Well, not crypto, not at this point, but they're going to do it. They're going to send it digitally to your bank account. And that's bad news for all of the people who are unbanked because they're going to be the exception to the rule. But obviously the goal is to get everybody into the banking system altogether.
So I'm guessing from their perspective, they're looking at all of these Social Security payments going out to the tune of, who knows, billions.
Trillions.
Trillions. But the number of people who are getting it that shouldn't be getting it, people that are 300 years old, 200 years old, 150 years old, you're talking about a massive amount of fraud here. And what I guess their defense would be, if we get everybody in the banking system and we validate them, give them a check mark that they're validated, they are who they are. You know, we've all been conditioned for that, right? Today I was looking at something online and I'm like, is that a legitimate post? And it had the Israeli government check mark and they said, yep, this is the official X account of the Israeli government, and they had the official check mark to validate. If you check somebody's credit rating or background using services, it will say verified and a check mark. They verified that is actually that person and their credit rating, not someone who has stolen their information and using it. You can deal as a business owner knowing that's the credit rating of that person. You're good to go. It's been verified. So they're probably, now we've all been conditioned for that using these programs for other businesses and things they might run. But now you've got the idea of, hey, let's validate everybody, get them in the banking system. We can stop printing checks, stop mailing it, wasting all this money. But we can now use our computers to make sure that we're not sending money to people that don't really exist.
That's part of it, for sure. This is the logic behind the universal ID system that's coming, where everybody will be tagged by their universal, if you will, legal identity that can reach into any database in the world or in our country and make sure that that data pertains to you individually. When I say as a legal ID, this is different than just like your Social Security number, which everybody has at this point, it seems like. So you can't, people steal identities. They start with a Social Security number. So that's not what we're talking about here. Basically, this universal ID system that will come in, that will regulate all financial transactions going forward.
I couldn't help but, as you were speaking, think about Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, welfare payments, all of this. If we had a constitutional form of government as our founders envisioned, who would, by the way, did not even want to open up the government treasury for the widow of a war hero. They're like, we value that war hero and what he did, and we really understand the sacrifice of his wife and family. But it is not the job of the government to become charity. This should be done by individuals. If we had a constitutional form of government, you would not have any of these payments going out. You wouldn't have Social Security, you wouldn't have Medicaid, you wouldn't have Medicare, you wouldn't have any of this. If the government was confined to its constitutional description, the powers the federal government has are limited, expressed, and the unlisted powers belong to the states in respect of people thereof, you would have no basis by which now to say, oh, but we need to make sure you get your Social Security check. We need to make sure you get your Medicaid, your Medicare, your entitlement programs. Isn't it interesting, the old phrase, the slippery slope, how when we get off the course of a constitutional republic, we now open ourselves up to greater tyranny in the long run. And now watch how many people who are dependent on that government check will gladly sign up and comply because they need to get that check. They need to get that payment. But if we had a constitutional form of government, the government would have no reason to ever go to this system because they shouldn't be passing out money to individuals because that's not the purpose of government.
Exactly right. You're actually right. Yeah. This business, however, with all of these technocrats circling around the administration right now, people like Elon Musk and David Sachs and Mark Andreessen and et cetera, these people as a pack now are pushing for a system that's going to be ruled by them in particular, but by AI, and all of the financial records have to be digitized to make that happen. And we see this war taking place right now where the technocrats are pitting themselves against the national governments of the world to take supremacy over this whole crypto space. And we saw when Trump came into office in the first place, he signed an executive order forbidding, at that point, the our central bank, the Federal Reserve, from not issue CBDCs. Well, that kind of put a hamstring on them. But on the other hand, now you see all this talk and conferences being held in Washington, D.C. by the crypto czar, David Sachs. They're all planning at this point to institute another parallel system, perhaps different than what the central bank's digital currency was going to be. But you see this tug of war taking place between the national governments and the technocrat class. Who's going to win this war? Well, who knows? It's certainly the central banks are just not going to go out of existence. They're in the mix. We know that. But on the other hand, we see the greatest central banker in the world, Mark Carney, all of a sudden being installed as a technocrat in Canada, right on our northern border. This guy was the cream of the crop of central banking when he chaired the Bank of England, which that's their central bank, and he was not elected in Canada. He's always been referred to as being a technocrat, but he's also a member of the Trilateral Commission. You can't make this stuff up. The Trilateral Commission is still obviously active in this battle. Is there a battle taking place between the Trilateral Commission, for instance, and these technocrats? I don't think so, because the Trilateral Commission started this whole business of technocracy in the first place in 1973. So
let me define a few terms real quick. Technocracy let me try to make that at the street level. Basically, tyranny by digital. Tyranny by digital, right? Using technology and digital to bring about tyranny, to track what you buy, to control where you can go, if you can get on an airplane, if you can get on a computer and log in, be on social media, vote. Everything is going to be done with technology, but the technology will be used for controlling our life. But it'll all be done in the name of convenience, safety, protection, efficiency, fighting fraud, fighting identity theft.
Yes.
But it's using technology to govern everyone and everything. That's basically a street level explanation of technocracy, correct?
It is, but remember, this is what they're telling us. What the convenience, the stopping fraud, and all that kind of stuff. Those are reasons that they want us to accept what they're going to do. However, it's always been about the economy in the first place. This business of the new international economic order that was started by the Trilateral Commission in 1973, this is still in play today. This reset economic system coming had soon. This was always in the crosshairs of the global elite from the get-go.
Now, I want to stop you
And
there and define for new people Trilateral Commission. Now, I
Yes.
remember back in 2017, I had some of these people online criticizing me, saying Brandon House is a conspiracy theorist that believes in the Trilateral Commission. And this is some of these hyper Calvinists that were trying to find some reason to criticize me. But someone should share the gospel so they don't die and go off to hell versus, worrying about what I'm talking about. But there you go. But they're out there just, the Trilateral Commission, Brandon House talks about, that's conspiracy. The Trilateral Commission is something that a man by the name of Barry Goldwater, who was a U.S. senator who ran for president, who Ronald Reagan campaigned earnestly for, he wrote extensively about the Trilateral Commission in his books, but he got his information largely from you when his chief of staff walked in your office in the early 70s and said, we want everything you got on the Trilateral Commission. So for those who think the Trilateral Commission is some, conspiracy theory, it is a real institution. Tell us who founded it and what was their objective.
Well, exactly. David Rockefeller and Zbigniew Brzezinski were the founders, and their objective was to create literally a new international economic order. They always confessed that. And they when they took over the the Carter administration, they weren't interested in politics. Everybody thought at the time, oh my gosh, we're being hijacked, the political system is under threat, whatever. They didn't care about the political system at all. They hijacked the economic engine of the world, and they played that out in subsequent years by appointing U.S. trade representatives, wrote all the treaties, the presidents of the World Bank and IMF and those sorts of things. They wanted to have the economic engine of the world under their control. They've done that. They did that in the early 70s. Now we see, and by the way, they were very visible back then because everybody could just point to the people in Carter's administration. Oh, there's one there. They were very visible. Then they went underwater in subsequent years. They hid out, in other words. Now they're back in force again in public with these technocrats who are running our government right now. This is the second time in history these people have dared to surface to take over the economic machinery of the world. This is still not about politics, honestly. A lot of people are arguing about politics and, is this guy, that guy, Democrat, Republican, it doesn't matter at this point. This is all about the economic system. This is what's at stake right now. Mm. Our country is predicated on economics, not necessarily on politics. But however, we've had a big string of, misfortune, I guess, in electing people who haven't done very good for us, the people. But nevertheless, this is about economics today. It's not about politics at all.
Here's a quote from one of my books. U.S. Senator Barry Goldwater ran for president in 1964, and you may remember that during his campaign, Ronald Reagan cut his political teeth giving speeches for Goldwater. Much later, in 1979, Goldwater wrote the book With No Apologies, in which he discussed globalists and the Trilateral Commission. Goldwater explained that the Trilateral Commission and globalists, quote, represents a skillful, coordinated effort to seize control and consolidate the four centers of power, which are political, monetary, intellectual, and ecclesiastical, end quote. That ecclesiastical obviously is the church. So you're talking politics, money, intellectual, academic, media, all that, and the church. So there you go, 1979 with no apologies.
Exactly, yeah.
Ronald Reagan knew about this group, didn't he?
Oh, he did, undoubtedly. He didn't do anything about it because he unfortunately
they tried to kill him in the first, or I don't know if but somebody tried killing him in the first 6 months of administration. So I think he kind of backed down a little bit. What say you?
Well, when he accepted George
H. Bush
as vice president, Bush was a member of the Trilateral Commission. The die was already cast for the Reagan administration, with Bush being in the second spot. He survived for 8 years. Then he has his own presidency for 4 years before Clinton came in. Clinton, by the way, was a member of the Trilateral Commission as well. So we've had a string of the Trilateral Commission influence across multiple administrations, and these people just won't go away. They always have their hat in the ring, if you will, to influence public policy as it relates to economics. You remember when George H.W. Bush said at the beginning of his administration, he said, he talked about the new world order, and it will come, he says, we'll make sure it is going to come. And you see this thread diving, coming up to the surface, diving, coming up to the surface, all these years. It's all about the economic system, and it still is today.
So tell me about a documentary. If you go to technocracy.news, and in this article, which I'm going to show again in a minute, but you have embedded a video. What is this video? I'm going to play a few minutes of it. What's the title of it, and when did you produce it?
Well, this video was basically explaining how technocracy is the end game. And it was not produced by me necessarily, but it was a collage of different clips and stuff somebody put together. And it has, for instance, James Corbett talking about technocracy, has me interviewed for Technocracy. I did an extensive set of interviews circa about, I want to say, 20, 25, 26 in that area. And a lot of this footage is in here as well. But my point of putting this in the first place, number one, it says it's all about economics. Number two, it explains why the technocrats today are surfacing to take control over the fruit of their tree.
Let's play a little bit of this. Here we go. Watch this.
Relations, their relations with developing countries, and their relations with communist countries, end quote.
The themes and the patterns in Brzezinski's book very closely mirrored early technocracy. And I don't think it was a mistake that he was at Columbia University at that time.
Technocracy billed itself as a social movement, a philosophy, a scientific solution to political and economic problems, and a new way of ordering the world. But at base, it is an idea for a new international economic order, one to be designed and managed down to the most minute detail by a select few, the technocrats.
Technocracy was defined very succinctly in 1938 by their own publication, the Technocrat magazine. And they call it a system of scientific engineering of, society. They saw themselves as a merger between hard science and social science, which really is an oxymoron. Social science is not really a science, in my opinion. But they really believed that. So they believed that they could take their scientific method that they used in the hard sciences and apply it to society. They also believed that they alone were the only ones that could run society correctly as a result of technology having come in and changed the fabric of society. They hated politicians. They hated the establishment, the organization of society the way it was, because it was not efficient. It was not, conservation-based, if you will, to conserve resources. And so they just kind of took it upon themselves to define an economic model that would replace capitalism and free enterprise. And that's exactly what it was, replacement economic system.
We are grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Time Magazine, and other publications whose directors have attended our meetings and restricted their policies of discretion for almost 40 years. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subject to the bright lights of publicity. But the world is now more sophisticated and prepared to march toward a world government.
Watergate is a coup d'etat. Watergate is not what you think. Watergate is not two crusading journalists, Woodward and Bernstein, working for the lovable curmudgeon Ben Bradley of the Washington Post and fighting the establishment and scooping the New York Times and doing all this crazy stuff. Watergate is a coup d'etat. It's quite evil, as you can see from the results, brought about by this same bankers clique with the help of CIA, FBI, Henry Kissinger, and the rest. And Gerald Ford is essentially a bit player, a walk-on part in this, and it reminds us that simply being president of the United States doesn't really indicate very much that you have special power. You can easily be a puppet, as indeed he was, a puppet of Kissinger. They say, let us make Nixon into a terrible example. Let us destroy him, and let us use that to permanently weaken not just the presidency, because they wanted to weaken the presidency, but let's weaken the Congress too. Let's subject the congressional committee system to a Watergating process, which we can then use to assert more and more financier control over the government. Because I think you can see this aspect in Watergate as it plays out over just a few more years, perhaps, than the mid-'70s. So this is what they do. And the idea with it is something like this. It starts with leaks. Whenever you have leaks, you have to wonder what's going on. Is the overthrow of the president going to be prepared? In the case of Nixon, the leak is the leak of the Pentagon Papers in the summer of 1971, I guess it is, which is essentially a bunch of secrets that are not secrets. Anybody who had been reading Le Monde or any competent European paper knew all this stuff. There was nothing in the Pentagon Papers that was really new. But it was an occasion when the Pentagon Papers were leaked and the New York Times published them and the Boston Globe and the Washington Post and the whole establishment came out to support the leaking of these papers by Daniel Ellsberg, a nuclear targeting planner of the Rand Corporation, not an innocent babe, I'm sure, but rather somebody playing an assigned part. At this point, Kissinger is able to go to Nixon and play on his paranoia, saying to him something like, Mr. President, these leaks are killing us. We can't have a competent government if we've got the leaks of all of these important documents. He says, look, there are all these leaks. We've got to do something about it. We've got to create a special secret police in the White House to fight the leaks. These are the plumbers.
Good evening. And
there you go. And I have interviewed Roger Stone extensively. He thinks the CIA was behind Watergate as well. Interesting how history seems to repeat itself. Now we've got the leak, if you will, of the app, the Signal app. And I'm very concerned about this individual, Mr. Wong, his wife, who I'm concerned who they're tied to. So again, I guess the point I'm trying to make is this a setup of Donald Trump? Are they using leaks again to get over on him as they got over on Nixon?
Good question. I wouldn't put anything past these people at this point. They've done it in the past. They could do it again. However, leaks always sow confusion, and confused people cannot see clearly. They'll never see what's going on. In other words, it's like the magician's trick. You have left hands doing something where the trick is actually taking place on the other hand. And this has been off and on. Oh my gosh, every presidency's had their episodes of leaks. And Obama had it, certainly Bush before him. Clinton had a bunch of leaks just like this. And you look back in history, this was played on the American people all along. What was going on behind the scenes that they did not want everybody to see? Well, this was the economic incursion going. The fabric of our country was being ripped out from under us with this technocrat theme of creating a new economic order. Well, here we are today. Same stuff, exactly.
Mm. And tell me, if you will, as we get ready to wrap, what's going on with Steve Bannon? He said he was going to use all his influence to stop Elon Musk from getting in the White House. That hasn't happened. Why is Steve Bannon being so vocal against Elon when I know he's been such a big supporter of Donald Trump?
That's a good question. I don't fully understand where Steve is coming from. Honestly, I listen to him occasionally. I don't want to comment, I don't think, on his mindset at this point. We do know that he had a fondness for Curtis Yarvin's philosophy somewhere along the way in the past. He's not talking about that today. but that's been documented historically. He had a fondness for Yarvin. He's talked with him before.
And for those who don't remember, that's the guy we dealt with last week that is calling for what?
The Dark Enlightenment. In particular, remember Elon Musk wears this black
Dark MAGA
hat, the dark MAGA hat. He's the only one that wears it. He's been wearing it ever since November 70 of 24, and everybody gave him a pass. What's this all about? He's just looking cool, He's just doing something different. No, this was a signal for his dark MAGA movement to move ahead. And the wearing of that hat called all these other technocrats to him from Silicon Valley in particular to put their application in for DOGE.
Which Yarvin is promoting a dark enlightenment.
Yes, exactly. It's the same thing. They're intent on destroying democracy and constitutional republic altogether.
And replacing it with technocracy,
yes.
Where you have unelected bureaucrats, unelected leaders using technology to orchestrate and control society and set public policy.
Exactly. And again, it's all about economics. However, they want to control all economic output and all consumption from people like American people. They want to control both ends of it, the spectrum, so that they can make the economy more efficient for them, not for us, but for them. They will reap trillions of dollars off this if they get this whole thing, put to bed.
And it's going to be sold to us again, cutting waste, cutting fraud, protection, safety, security.
Yes.
It's going to be sold to us like that. So we have a new executive order, March 25th, 2025, modernizing payments to and from America's bank account. And again, what you're saying is this is basically going to require anyone that's getting Social Security, for example, they're not going to get a check in the mail anymore. They're going to have to show up and open a bank account or obviously, I don't know how you cash I don't know how they're cashing Social Security checks now without a bank account. I don't know. Can you go to Kroger or can you go to the bank and just cash it and get a?
Yes, there are companies around the states who are cash. They're cash companies.
It's one of those cash businesses you see a lot of times in the inner city, where you show up with your Social Security or government check. They take a percentage and then cash it for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Hand you back paper cash.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay,
that's right.
So that's going to go away. Everyone's going to have to get a bank account.
That's right.
Which again sounds good because we need to account for this money. We can't have trillions of dollars, billions and billions and trillions being wasted. We got to verify people. We can't have 9-year-olds getting, Small Business Association loans. Didn't you heard that this week, right?
Yes, I know. Incredible.
How much was that? Let me look it up. Do you remember how much that was?
I don't remember. All of this stuff that's been leaked out from DOGE, it's all it can't be verified. So we have to believe what they're saying. I just a little bit skeptical about all the stuff that they've surfaced at this point. I hope they are being honest about it, but I wouldn't put them past it.
Well, I found the clip here. This is just this week. Yeah. This is just this week.
Administration where they were handing out loans, $330 million worth of loans to people under the age of 11. I think the youngest, Kelly, was a 9-month-old who got a $100,000 loan. That's a very precocious baby we're talking about here.
Well, we're tackling the fraud, waste, and abuse in the agency. We've seen, hundreds of billions of dollars of fraud go unprosecuted, so we're taking that on. We have a zero-tolerance policy for fraud, and we continue to crack down on it and make sure people are held accountable.
And you have a lot of that. We've found far too much of it. It's a pure fraud. We like to use the words waste and abuse because they sort of sound good, but many of these things are pure fraud.
The Small Business Administration where they were handing out.
Did she say hundreds of billions in fraud?
That's right. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Well, again, you can see where the American people are going to say, yeah, You know, I did a show in 2020 on the fact that the United Nations, one of the goals of the United Nations is, I think it's goal 16.9 of the Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, is to have everybody registered. Everybody gets a digital ID. Everybody gets registered. And they had a conference at the United Nations called ID 2020, I think it was. And in early 2020, I did a TV show during COVID when we had a lockdown. We started doing TV every night because we had a captive audience. And I did a whole segment on ID 2020 at the UN. And I said, watch how this will be sold by the people on the right to cut down on illegal immigration, to make sure that illegal immigrants aren't getting government money, to make sure people aren't cheating the entitlement programs. Voila, here we are. And it will be sold that way. And that's a good use. But the problem is, like so much, it's not the technology, it's how we use the technology. And what you're saying is it's setting up for a technocracy where everything is controlled. And I think what it's setting up for, frankly, is the mark of the beast system where no one's going to be able to buy or sell. It's not the beast system, but I think that's what it's setting up for. What say you in closing?
It probably is. And we can see it. We can see how AI isn't developing at this point. It's going to be stunning in a few years, just absolutely over the top stunning. And most people will be so fooled by it at that point, they will not be able to tell if they're talking to a human or to a machine.
Well, Logan showed me a video that's out this week. I don't even know what the new technology is called, Logan, but he showed it to me, and you cannot tell that the individual's not real. You can't tell.
Yes, exactly.
Here's the article. Technocrats spark global war over crypto supremacy. Technocrats spark global war over crypto supremacy. And you can watch this whole video. It's an hour long that features also our guest here, Patrick Wood, Technocracy Endgame. You can find it at technocracy.news, technocracy.news. Patrick, as always, thanks for being with us.
You bet. Good to be with you.
You too, my friend. Patrick Wood checking in.